this pail. Hello and welcome to episode 29 of Great Things with Great Tech, the podcast highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. My name is Anthony Spiteri, and in this episode, we're diving into a company that enables developers to automate the distribution, operations, and lifecycle management of containerized microservices across public and private cloud and service provider networks. A company that grew 800% in 2020. That company is Rafay, and I'm talking to Haseeb Budhani, the co-founder and CEO of Rafay. Welcome to the show, Haseeb.
Anthony, nice to talk to you today. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So just before we get into Managed Kubernetes, again, one of my favorite subjects, if you love great things with great tech and would like to feature in future episodes, you can click on the link in the show notes or go to launch.gtwgt.com to register your interest. And as a reminder, as always, if you're not subscribed to the show, please hit the subscribe button below. We're on all the great podcast platforms as well, all distributed by Anchor FM. So with that, let's get into Rafay. And, as per usual, I want to start talking history and a bit of a facts about the birth of Rafay. But I think, Haseeb, you've got a really interesting background. So maybe first you just introduce yourself and give us a little bit of a background leading up to, the founding of Rafay as a company.
Am I starting when I was born or school? Or...
Well, if you want to go all the way back there, that would be great. Let's think about sort of the 2000s. Let's start at the 2000s.
Yeah. So, in senior year in college, undergrad, so I went to USC in Los Angeles for undergrad. There was this gentleman who was a master's kind of graduate student, and he said to me, "Why are you applying to this Cisco and Ericsson and whatnot? There's this thing called a startup. You should really try that because this is like late 1999, like end of '99. Mark was about to kind of do this, but he gave me this idea, and I said, yeah, I hadn't seen it. And he said, try this out. I said, okay, all right. So I applied to a bunch of companies, and I got a job at a startup, and it was awesome. It was a crazy time, a crazy company. In hindsight, that was one of three companies that sort of became, the creators of single sign-on. I had no idea at the time, obviously, what single sign-on was, but I ended up working on, a lot of fun stuff there. And I guess never stopped, right? So I kept going startup to startup to startup. Only ended up at largish companies through acquisitions. And I think, I don't know if I'll ever go apply for a job at a big company ever. Because, startups are just, the best place to be. You learn a lot, you move very fast. And I've gotten used to it.
Just talk us, looking through your background, there was a company there where I think you founded and started and actually had an event and sold to Akamai. Do you want to talk about that? I found that quite fascinating.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So my co-founder and I, in different companies, were working on proxies and TCP optimization, et cetera. And it turns out that both of us independently were thinking about the reverse proxy market, the load balancing market. And we had both come up with the same idea that, hey, at some point, all these applications end up running in various places. Nobody's kind of running in a single data center anymore. So then what's your DMZ? There's no DMZ anymore. So maybe there shouldn't be a DMZ. Maybe you should be thinking about another way to manage access to applications. We kind of talked about the idea. We sort of pitched each other on the exact same idea. That, hey, I'm thinking about this idea. And it was kind of serendipity. That company was, in hindsight now, one of the first software-defined perimeter companies out there. We were the first kind of Gartner cool vendor in the SDP space. At the time, there was no concept. There was no phrase called SDP, but not the thing. And Akamai, who was a customer of mine, then a partner, then an investor, and then ended up, calling the company. It was a great time. Akamai is an incredible company.
Yeah.
I kind of went there, with a bit of hesitation. It's a big company. I've never done this before. But the number of people, just smart people in that company was just phenomenal. It's just what a great place to be. Some of the innovation, I think I wish Akamai would market more because some of the things they have built there, it is phenomenal.
Well, think about Akamai, right? Akamai is all tied to my early days, right? Because my early days working for ISP service provider, I was in hosting, so I was very big into the reverse proxies, the load balancing, because I would manage, large farms of web farms. And then there was always, no matter what data center you went into in this country when I was young, there was always an Akamai shelf somewhere. You know what I mean? And what's that? That's Akamai doing their thing. And so they were just everywhere, even back then. So you're right. It's one of those companies that kind of drove the internet to a certain extent in those early days. So yeah, that's quite fascinating. Cool. That's awesome. You got that tie there, and you were definitely in a space that was ahead of its time. So that's kind of foreshadowing, where you are today with Rafay, I think. But so just talk a little bit about, Rafay was founded in, was it 2017, 2018 when the company was founded?
We started writing code early 2018.
2018, okay.
January 2018, yeah.
So what made you get to that point? Like, what had you seen around the Kubernetes space that drove you to create Rafay?
I've shared the story once or twice that every successful product I've worked on as an engineer, as a product manager, or as a founder, it has been a result of a prior bad experience. So you work on something and, a component of whatever strategy you're working on doesn't work, and that kind of bugs you, and you kind of think about it and go, well, we got to do something about this. And that becomes a project you start.
Yeah.
At the company that we were with that was acquired by Akamai, security company, very good product, doing really well in the market now, even now. But in our opinion, the infrastructure components, the orchestration for running this very large application across many sites on the internet could have been done better. And we spent a lot of time thinking about it. And we used the tools at the time. We were familiar with Rancher and whatnot. Yeah. We kept thinking about how, wow, this is, the tools at the time required us to maintain a very large platform team to build the automation layer, because we were consuming open source and then kind of sort of cobbling it together. And that really bugged us. And that became, an impetus to kind of think about, well, is there a better way to solve this problem? Initially, we started thinking about kind of more edge deployments, but then as we talked to more customers, we found out that, look, fundamentally, this modernization journey for enterprises in general is really early. Most companies are early in the modernization journey. It doesn't matter if KubeCon's been around for many years. Look, enterprise, they are early.
Yeah.
High-tech startups, it doesn't matter. Enterprises are early. Yeah. And when you are in an early market, the tooling that you provide to them has to take into account that they're early, which means they don't have that experience that they might have in 5 years. But then more importantly, and this is something you and I were talking about earlier, it's about, well, these are enterprise customers. They're not, engineers doing, fun projects in a corner. This
not tinkering.
Now has to live. Yeah, they're not tinkering, right? This is serious business. I'm running a production application, maybe an insurance application or a backend for a financial services app. It better work. It better have the security controls in place that IT is used to. And if you don't solve for that, and at the same time you don't make it turnkey, this is not considered enterprise grade, and you're not going to get adoption. So companies existed. That's all their problem, but they don't seem to have those enterprise grade requirements around governance and auditing and scaling and security, etc. Let's solve for that, and that is what we are selling presently. You've tried the product, Anthony. You've seen it in action.
I have.
I will, I make the following statement a lot to customers. I guess I'll make it live today. Show me a product that is easier to use than Rafay when it comes to enterprise management for Kubernetes. No way. There's nothing out there that is easier to use, scales better, is more turnkey, is more secure. Not one.
And you know what? I kind of have to, and not just saying this because you're on the show, I kind of have to agree. Like I obviously got a really good deep dive from your team a couple of weeks ago. And even last couple of days, I've been self-driving myself and, having a play with it as well. To be able to deploy a cluster to a Kubernetes cluster to Amazon on-prem, it's really easy. And again, there's security elements there that are generally overlooked, and that made me go, wow. But let's I want to talk about the interface and the actual platform and whatnot a little bit later on. I think I just want to go to a point you mentioned about enterprise Kubernetes, because obviously you're solving this problem about managed Kubernetes. You're offering this to enterprise. You're saying, hey, if you're going to run serious applications and basically, trust your business to a Kubernetes application or containerized microservice running with Kubernetes, you need to have full confidence in the stack end to end. And you're correct in a point to say that up to this point, that trust really isn't there, right? Which is why you see a lot of people out there, if it's not developer-led, a developer that's doing a DevOps thing, that's developing on what they know. And I've talked about this quite a few times on the show up to this point. And also outside of this, I talk about this almost daily now. Developers are leading this this modern platform because they're the ones that are writing the applications. You mentioned startups and new companies. They're more likely to basically be born in this world. Enterprises are very slow. If I think back, the analogy that I can see is where virtualization was in 2006, 7, 8, where you had this new tech. And again, I don't like making the comparison with virtualization and Kubernetes because I think they solve different problems. But up until ESX had ESXi and vCenter, it wasn't that easy. You know what I mean? There wasn't this concept of scalability, management, vMotion, HA. You know what I mean? Security. So vCenter really brought that in spades, and that's when the enterprise picked up VMware, and that's when it tremendously grew. So I think that point that you make is right on the ball. Is that we haven't reached that space yet because you can't trust your business on something that's inherently insecure, doesn't scale, and you can't manage properly. So that's, I think, what Rafay is trying to solve, right?
Agreed. And look, the VMware example is definitely the right one. And I'm sure many of us in this space aspire to be the VMware for Kubernetes. I think VMware also aspires to be the VMware for Kubernetes. But
I was going to say, that's right. Yeah,
they've spent enough money buying into that space now for, I think, $4 billion or something like that. I think the engineers at VMware early on, they understood what turnkey means, right? Having, like, how easy is it to import an OVF template and have a VM up and running? Oh my God, so in the early 2000s, 2003 or so, I remember that, we would run, 20, 30 different VMs to do QA testing on a single, like a server from Gateway. Yep. I don't know if Gateway exists now, but from Gateway computers. And it was so easy, right? Just adding on more machines. And I remember writing an automation layer that I could just spin up VMs and then spin them down to kind of do testing. It was so easy. Under the covers, what the hypervisor was doing, I didn't actually know any of that stuff. I don't care, but that's the thing, right? It just works.
Yep.
Right. And it would tie back into the companies. At the time, we all used to have Windows, kind of farms and domain controllers in our offices, and it would connect to that, and we had authentication, just magic, right? I didn't have to go take a VBox, VirtualBox, if you remember from back in the day, and get this working and this other thing working, and the authentication is broken, and NAT wasn't working, so we had to do bridging, and all these problems were taken care of by VMware. Turnkey, right? And that's what everybody needs. And turnkey it's not. Enterprises don't want turnkey because they don't know what they're doing, right? So sometimes people confuse this as, well, there's a skills gap. Sure, maybe there is a skills gap with Kubernetes, but I think it's about reliability, right? If I do something, it better happen the same way every single time. If I'm running a script, I don't know, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. How many times do DevOps people say, we're going to upgrade in the next 30 minutes, and then 6 hours later, they're still trying to figure out what broke where? It's not that they don't know what they're doing, they know everything, but it's about reliability. Can it happen the same way again and again and again? Like you build clusters with our platform, you can build them 1,000 times over. There's no difference. It's going to work every single time, right? And by the way, provisioning clusters, to me, by the way, that's another thing about enterprises now. The fact that Rafay can help you provision a cluster, that to me is like, I don't know, 5% of the product. Who cares?
It's a table stake,
can
right?
do that.
Yeah,
it's all these other things that you need to actually deploy an application, because I think, particularly in the industry I'm in, many of my competitors sort of focus on the cluster provisioning piece. And I think what we forget sometimes is, what is the point of Kubernetes again? It's deploying applications, right? That's why we're here, so that developers can move faster and they can deliver applications to market faster. So everything else that needs to happen to actually make the application work, that frankly is a lot more important than building the cluster. That, as you said, that is just table stakes.
Yeah, I've made this analogy before. I think a lot of people, especially in the platform ops world, the guys like infrastructure guys who are coming into this world, a lot of people are happy just deploying a cluster in any way and doing a kube control get nodes and seeing something, right? Everyone's happy with that, and that's kind of their level of personal satisfaction with regards to Kubernetes today. Again, in that tinkering sense. But when then I challenge anyone for that next step is to just, get the CSI working, get the snapshots working, go put some ingress, go configure a load balancer, go deploy an application, back it up. All those non-table stake situations, which are actually what you need to build confidence in a platform to make it enterprise level at that sort of plateau point, is what's needed. So I think Rafay does a really good job with that. So maybe because we haven't really talked about the interface and what Rafay does, maybe just give a little bit of a rundown of Rafay in general. It's a management plane, runs from a web UI, installs. It uses scripts to basically, it deploys a little agent. You then run a script and it basically preps hosts no matter where it is, and then you can basically get your Kubernetes clusters installed and managed, ready for that next step that you talk about. Maybe just give us a little bit more of a background on the UI, what you guys are actually doing and how it's working.
Yeah, there's a UI, there's a CLI, there's an API, depending on the audience, and more in an enterprise. By the way, what we find is, and we recommend this. Speaking of interfaces, sources of truth matter. So as an example, if you're deploying infrastructure, so cluster, application, components that go on the cluster before the application shows up, all of these things have to sit in a Git repo. Source of truth, right? It has to be somewhere reliable that I can go and kind of audit easily. So everything starts from some source of truth. More often than not, it's a Git repo. From there, it can either go straight to Rafay. So we support GitOps natively in our product, as you've seen, and you can have Rafay sort of receive a webhook to do what it needs to do. Or a pretty common pattern is customers will have Terraform, fine, and then Terraform calls Rafay. Or the more kind of folks maybe who are as old as I am probably prefer like a Jenkins CI system, or some Circle CI, GitLab, etc. So these are the patterns where automation starts, and at that point, that automation is calling Rafay via some we have the CLI, we have an API, and then you deploy infrastructure, build stuff. The user interface, when people start, it's very easy. It's a great place to start, but it becomes a visibility platform. It's a dashboard to see your fleet in action.
Yep.
What's running where? So is something broken? Anthony just logged into that one cluster. I got to go figure that out. What did you do? So I can see what you. This is where interfaces make a lot of sense, because operations engineers can leverage them and kind of get to kind of resolution of issues faster.
That's the warm and fuzzy of operations. We need to see something visually on the dashboard, right?
Yep.
So that part.
Absolutely. Awesome. Absolutely. And look, I mean, it's what we have this constant fight, frankly, in our company. I continue to kind of keep focusing on like the UI and where the buttons should be and whatnot. And the younger, smarter engineers in the community keep reminding me, dude, you're old. Nobody cares anymore about UIs. Everybody's doing automation. But then I keep showing them, look, this one customer, he just said he loves the UI. So look, we have a whole world to sell to. So we have to take the burden of supporting all these interfaces.
What's really funny about that is those younger dudes, they're kind of the problem, right? In terms of the DevOps lead pushing the way and trying to say, oh no, man, this is like, this is old school looking at a UI. But reality is in this world that we're trying to, and you're trying to capture, that's not the case, right? And that's not going away anytime soon.
Well, maybe I think perhaps the right way to think about it is both, right? Because things that should be rather things that can be automated should be automated, or maybe the other way around. Everything should be automated. And we tell our customers that. In fact, as part of our kind of onboarding with our customers, we kind of tell them, okay, you need to pick an option. Is it end-to-end GitOps? Is it kind of Terraform driven? Is it a CI driven? You have to pick one. Because we are not comfortable just kind of saying to you, here's the product and figure it out. We want to help our customers be successful. And a key part of that, because we are selling to them reliability, is a consistent methodology to do any action, any workflow that you execute on a platform. We want there to be a way for you to do it consistently the same way and auditable. So your systems know exactly who did what, right? So that is critical. But to the point of exactly what is it that this product does. So I kind of think of our platform as delivering 5 capabilities, and these 5 are not kind of equally important in my opinion, and some kind of have more value to customers than others. In fact, if it's a customer who's early in their Kubernetes journey, they look at the 5 buckets differently.
Yes.
Folks who are mature, they look at them differently. So somebody who's maybe starting their journey out now, they will start with the provisioning bucket, so we can help customers build clusters. You've seen that programmatically, UIs, etc. You can do this in any cloud, on-prem, at the edge. You can do upgrades of the clusters. So that's kind of, to me, frankly, that's, we talked about this being table stakes. I don't know, maybe that's 5% of the product. I mean, there are companies that's all they do, but if all we did was this, look, we're not going to make a lot.
Innovation, the differentiation,
okay, all right, so there's 500 companies do that. Why do you exist? But then the second thing is, why Kubernetes in the first place? Application deployment. So we've built a pretty extensive application deployment capability, native GitOps support, pipeline support, Helm chart integrations, all kinds of things we've done to help our customers deploy applications and move faster. So that's number 2, application deployment. The third one is, well, I'm deploying applications, I'm deploying clusters. I need to integrate my one or more clusters into, some enterprise systems, right? So I have a registry, I have Splunk, I have, blah, 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 right? I use Veeam for backups, so Casper for backups. How do I bring that in? So there's all these integrations. I use HashiCorp Vault for secrets management. Each one of these is a job, right? You got to go figure this out. And now 2 people in your company have to become experts on this third-party tool just to make it work here. Now investment, right? And it's not like you do it one time and you forget about it. Those tools also have their own lifecycle. They're going to change in 3 months, 6 months, or whatever. So you get to now, right? So now your team's bandwidth is already, if you do this yourself, your team's bandwidth is getting reduced at every step because you're learning more and more and more things. So, you can't focus on anything anymore. So we provide a ton of integrations out of the box that make your life easy. So logging and, metrics management and secrets management and registry integrations and, blah, 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 lots of things.
Straight out of the box. Yeah, which is right. There's very few that actually, if any, that do that, coupled with, the basics, that table stakes that you're talking about and more. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, like even OPA, right? I mean, every large enterprise wants either pod security policies, or soon enough they're going to expect biggest PSPs are sort of going away, or it can be all OPA. People expect OPA to be in the product. It's there, it works. Calico there works. That's number 3. Number 4 is what we call fleet management. So nobody's got a single cluster. Nobody. It's not possible. You have a dev environment, you have a production environment, maybe you have pre-prod environment. You already have 3. And you know what? No enterprise is one flat organization. So the idea that I'm going to take this massive dev cluster and partition that using namespaces and just kind of divvy it up across teams sounds interesting. Doesn't seem to happen in practice.
Yeah.
People have more than one cluster, more than 2 clusters, more than 3 clusters. Most enterprises and
which marries any platform, right? Virtualization is the same sort of thing.
Yep. So how do you know they look the same? 6 months from now, you've been running a fleet of whatever, let's call it 5 clusters, 10 clusters. Are they all running the right version of Prometheus? Are they all running the right version of Prisma Cloud? Are they all running the right version of New Relic? I don't know. People have 20, 30 different components that they install on each cluster before the applications even show up. So fleet management, right?
And also just the whole ecosystem, the cloud native foundation ecosystem. I mean, you've seen the pictures, you know this well. There's thousands and thousands of options out there and differentials that could go into these clusters. So it's actually it's literally the Wild West of applications and componentry.
Yep, absolutely. Look, I mean, every week or so, and this is not an exaggeration, we'll hear about some customer who has some tool that somebody in that company thought was awesome and they wanted to be installed in their Kubernetes cluster and go, what is this now? But we of course, we take the burden and we learn it and we write recipes for it. So yeah, this market is crazy. In fact, because you brought up that CNCF landscape, I don't know if that was done to scare people or make people feel good. I don't understand the point. Like I started like, oh my God, this is a lot. How is anybody going to keep up with it?
I tell you what, it makes for a great talking point. And when I do presentations, I remember the first time I showed it at a conference to a lunch function, everyone was like, whoa, what is this? And it just generates really interesting conversation. So if anything with that, but it also kind of makes, I think, yeah, from an enterprise, if I was looking at that, I'd be scared as well. I'd be like, holy moly, that's a lot to deal with. I'm just going to stick with the traditional applications.
Yep. Yeah. This is gonna, I think, impede sometimes, decision making in companies because, oh my God, I got to pick one of each of these, two of these. Anyway, so that's number 4, which is fleet management. And the 5th one, which turns out to be, for the more mature companies, the most important one is I don't know what the right words are. I call them governance and security. Anthony just logged into 3 clusters. What did he do?
Oh, yeah.
Is he allowed to do this? Do my clusters look the same? And if they don't, do I know about it? Do I audit for everything? Can I export it into Splunk? Not just my application logs, but also what my users and developers are doing. Okay, there's a production problem and DevOps doesn't know the app. So developers need access to production. Well, that's a problem because that's a PCI problem, or some certification is going to have an issue with non-ops logging in. So is there a read-only way to do this? Can I audit that? This opens up this whole basket of questions that typically comes from the enterprise security team or the enterprise architecture team that we've thought about. And we've added that as a layer into the platform.
Yeah.
So many of our very mature customers, they tell us like that provisioning, we saw this like 2 years ago, I don't care. GitOps, I got Flux, don't care. Fleet management, yeah, Terraform, awesome. This is interesting, right? So depending on where you are on your journey, we provide things, but these are the 5 components that I think at this point, and over time, we're going to keep adding more and more capabilities into each of these 5 buckets. I think any enterprise grade Kubernetes management platform has to solve for all 5. We'll be at different points in our journeys, right? Our roadmaps will be wherever they are. But if we don't solve for all 5, it's not interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of, that locks in the value add, I feel, if I was to look at it from an enterprise point of view. How about, like, obviously, in terms of what the markets that you target, I mean, my obvious interest in managed Kubernetes is from a service provider perspective, right? That's my background. If I was working back in a service provider, I'd be looking for a platform that I could compete to a certain level with the public clouds. But this kind of isn't that. This kind of integrates that as well and gives me an opportunity to build services not everywhere effectively. You talked about that fleet management. So, how do you, enterprise is one thing, but, what's your sort of pitch to providers effectively and how this would fit?
So we have a partnership that's been announced with Verizon, where Verizon is providing Rafay as a Application Edge is the product name. It's a partnership, so they call it Application Edge.
Yep.
It's a white label product. Where they provide a way for their customers to deploy modern applications into micro edges. So think retail stores, factories, etc.
Yeah.
And into the cloud. So not just edge, also in the cloud. Why? Because the same customer who's going to have 1,000 stores where they deploy applications is probably running their backend in Amazon.
Yeah.
Of course they are, right? Because where else? Or when I say AWS or Amazon, I mean it like Google, right? I don't mean only Amazon. It could be any public cloud. So which means we don't want our customers, Verizon would agree with this, which is why they've done what they've done. They don't want their customers to have to kind of pick a tool for deployment into the edge, but then it's an entirely separate tool when they go to a data center versus AWS versus Azure. Doesn't make any logical sense. They thought through it, and I agree with their thinking, which is people want a singular tool. And an edge is a location, much as a cloud is a location. So step back from edge versus cloud versus data center. That's a distraction. Compute's compute. It just works. It just so happens that sometimes it's less compute, sometimes it's more compute.
Yeah. And
a platform should be smart enough to understand that. So that's been a very successful partnership for us in more ways than one. And we've done similar partnerships with others that will get announced over the next year. So why did we win these? We won these because look, we sell a SaaS product. You've logged into console.rafay.dev and it just kind of works. You don't have to install a controller. So many of the vendors in this space started with an open source product. They have a single tenant piece of software that you install and then you own it now. Yep. One way or another, you own it, right? You have to take care of the care and feeding of this thing, and that in itself becomes a burden over time. Right. So if you're running n number of environments, you're running n number of copies of this piece of software, who's going to pay for that? Right. And you pay for it with people and time, right? Which you don't have to with SaaS. Now, the validation for SaaS now is that many of our, not many, all of our kind of, friends in the community, they're offering hosted options of their software. still single tenant, not multi-tenant, hosted were options. And we all know hosted is not SaaS. There's a big difference between hosted and SaaS. But they do it because the customers want it. Right? End of the day, they're smart people, right? They understand what the market is demanding, which is, I don't want to own this anymore. You own it. I'm going to manage my clusters with your software, but your backend, you own it for me. I'm not going to do this anymore. So because you built it as a SaaS, it's naturally multi-tenanted, which is what an MSP needs. If they have to now take some open source solution and then run it across n number of customers, they have to usually write a layer on top just to manage the multi-tenancy.
Yeah.
So now you're taking up your software and then writing software on top just to kind of segregate customers, and that is an additional burden. It just happens to be in the product. So if there's an MSP trying to kind of roll out Kubernetes for their customer base, you have to look for a multi-tenant product. We are one of very, very few that actually do that. If you're an MSP, give us a call.
Yeah, and I think I can kind of back that up by thinking about having used the product and having, kicked the tires a little bit with it. From my perspective, an MSP or a service provider could use a SaaS componentry, and then they've obviously got the ability through your security and your policies to segment. That becomes a multi-tenancy. The blueprinting is amazing. So that you've got the concept of blueprints, which you can basically make a blueprint and then apply that to different clusters. So from an SP perspective, all they've got to provide is effectively the underlying hardware. So the abstraction is you guys abstracting that layer. You just provide them a VM, and you've got some great deployment options as well. Linux, you've got, I think you can go from KVM, VMware, you've got upstream Kubernetes options. You've got a ton of it that basically works through when you actually do the configuration. So there's lots of options there. So as a service provider, I could very easily just go, okay, I've got the compute. The compute can be on anything, right? It doesn't really matter. As long as I can provision a VM, then I can basically apply Rafay on top of it and offer my customers, my tenants, the ability to consume Kubernetes, deploy micro applications, and containerized services. So yeah, I think it's got a really big positive there, which is obviously why I looked into you guys, and I was really keen to get you guys on there. So let's just talk.
Hey,
go ahead.
By the way, no, I gotta say, my friend, you've clearly spent a lot of time in the product, so I really appreciate it. I mean, you've done a lot of research. You clearly know all the capabilities in the platform. Thank you for taking the time and digging into it. That's awesome.
Well, yeah, I love great. This is the whole point of the show, right? It's great technology, great things with great tech. So I love all this stuff. It's why I live. It keeps me going. I'm so lucky. Let's just kind of finish off a little bit by talking a bit about, very quickly your thoughts on Kubernetes as it is today. I mean, you've mentioned a little bit at the start, foreshadowing. Where's your take on Kubernetes today? How much has it infiltrated, production, maturity levels? We've kind of alluded to it, but what's your quick take on it today?
I think this market is very early. I think most enterprises are taking Kubernetes very seriously, but it takes time to rewrite applications. It just takes time. So a lot of them are doing different shifts into Kubernetes, but still, it's early, and it's great. I mean, look, what I find most fascinating about this market is every enterprise I talk to is looking into Kubernetes, but pretty much every enterprise I talk to is early. Even when they say they're not, they've been doing this for 2 years. As you kind of dig deeper, it's still early days for applications, because from a percentage perspective as to how many apps are now modernized and are running in some kind of Kubernetes-ish environment, the percentage is never 50, never 20, right? Yeah. It's a handful of apps are there, and the rest will come, right? So we're looking at a 5 to 10 year journey for this kind of community to kind of get everybody there, but it's happening. So at this point, what's clear is that there's no other solution. It's not like tomorrow there's going to be something else that's going to take over. Kubernetes is hands down. I mean, the original team that kind of worked on Kubernetes, I mean, they're clearly incredibly sharp people who saw through the pain and who understood the value of openness in a platform like this. And they clearly had learned their lessons from things like OpenStack, and they kept this kind of Kubernetes is quite kind of one of those kind of sacrosanct, right? It's just kind of we keep it away from all that other jazz that kind of kill is the wrong word, but slow down OpenStack.
OpenStack,
yeah. So I think they've done a great job. But now it's on vendors like us to make sure the message continues, and the sort of the proselytizing that's happened over the last few years about why modern applications are important. We need to make sure that the infrastructure does not become an impediment. Right? Yep. So that's why people like us exist, right? If we can make the infrastructure just simple to consume, then applications will come faster.
Yeah.
Right. And that's success.
Simple infrastructure leads to simpler and more efficient operations, which is the key, right? Because the separation of dev, I talk about the separation of developers and platforms and IT ops. That has to happen. You can't have developers doing a traditional management of a platform. It just doesn't work like that. That's not their jam. That's not what they're good at. I mean, some would claim they are, but the reality is if you're going to get it up the stack into the enterprise or even the SMEs, you need to have confidence that the operations guys, the platform ops, are going to know what's happening, ease of use, more efficiency. I think that's the trigger point, and that's the inflection point where it will become more mainstream. And you also mentioned, I think a lot of companies in the space, and you guys obviously are doing a great job of that as well, around education. You guys and this is the one thing I've noticed about a lot of Kubernetes companies. That deal in Kubernetes, there's a lot of education that goes into it as well. It's like you said, you're basically preaching to basically make people aware of what's happening in the space. So they're going down the right path. So they're not taken down the wrong way. So you guys have done that as well. You've got great education resources on your site as well.
Yeah. This is another reason why, I say this market is early, because so often I talk to people who say, look, I mean, we only have a cluster up. I'm not really sure why I need anything beyond EKS. And then we have a conversation about, look, well, here's your journey for the next year. You're going to solve for this and this and this and this and this and this and this. Have you thought about all these? Have you heard about all these in your company? And they go, yeah, our DevOps engineers have brought up 3 of them already. They're on our backlog. We're going to get to, okay. So everybody makes assumptions about where, what this market is, and many a times they don't have complete clarity about what the next 12 to 14 or 18 months or 24 months are going to look. And I think it's really important to take, like a sales call, right? I mean, and at least we're trying to train our salespeople to do this. Don't go in and ask the question, do you have budget? Who's the buyer? What the hell do you do? I don't know why you exist right now, right? So we got to step back a little bit and have a conversation about their journey towards kind of production grade, enterprise grade Kubernetes, and all of the steps that they'll have to take. And they, as customers, and I think this is because our customers are so sophisticated, right? They're pretty smart people. It's actually quite fascinating to have conversations where, smart people, when you give them data, right? They just want data, right? When you give them data, they agree. Right? It's not an argument, and this is what I find to be such a great thing about my job. Right? Most of the time, I'm part of the sales team. I'm selling out there. Yeah. All we're doing is just telling people, look, here's the journey. Here's the 8-10 things you have to think about, and it just so happens that we solve 8-10 of these things already, and it's a platform you can consume it. So the conversations become easier and easier. The more you focus on information sharing versus, hey, do you got budget this quarter?
I get it.
No, don't do that, right? Yeah. Just talk, right? And I think that I mean, look, I'm not a sales guy by profession or training, but I'm really, really enjoying this part where we get to engage with these really smart, sharp people at every level, CIO level, or all the way down to the DevOps engineer level. I mean, they see the light, they go, okay, I completely understand because I've kind of thought about this already. I just didn't know that this was there. Yeah. Right? So the challenge forward is making sure the world understands that, look, you don't need to invest the next 2 years and whatever number of engineers trying to solve these problems yourself. There's a whole set of companies who are there exactly to do that for you. We work for you now. You focus on the app, you focus on the business value, the infrastructure layer, we got it for you.
I understand, yeah. And I to your point, I really love being in and around this space as well. I mean, I'm obviously not as entrenched as what you are, but I've spent a lot of time the last sort of 6 months talking, about the value prop of, why Kubernetes, what you need to do, just teaching people about it a little bit. And I'm very much on the periphery of that. But even I get excited about that because I understand the change and where we're at in its life cycle. So that's pretty cool. Let's finish off with a couple of questions because, again, time runs so quick. We could talk for hours, like I like to say on this show. So just answer me, about, what's Rafay looking to do? Obviously, we've talked about, and I think the value prop is there, the innovation points are there, how you've disrupted this market is there. So what are you looking to do to continue to, firstly, internally disrupt yourselves and then disrupt the market moving forward?
So I think we'll be busy writing code for a long time, and that's a good problem because this is indeed a very large problem. But in the very near future, some of the things that we have kind of top of mind is here's something that is, because we talked about VMs before, the number of companies who are deploying kind of data center on or edge. They ask the question, hey, so my apps are not yet 100% modernized. So I have some containers, but I still have some VMs. And wow, so I got to now run a VM stack and a Kubernetes stack. I heard about a thing called KubeVirt.
KubeVirt. I was going to say KubeVirt.
VMs and Kubernetes. But that doesn't just mean, okay, and some of our kind of competitors have done this. They can say, well, here's KubeVirt, install it. Here's 30 commands you have to run, and then it works. No, that's not what enterprises are looking for. They're looking for a very simplistic way where they can take a VM that's maybe sitting in a Nexus repo and then be able to kind of create a workflow, and that just gets deployed across 100 locations and just kind of pops up, right? It's turnkey. Yeah. So we've taken a pretty significant step in that direction.
Okay.
Pretty big investment. So end of the year we'll have, or not end of the year actually, no, August. We'll have VM support in the platform. So
that's exciting. That's awesome.
Containers. So I think it's solid technologies like virtual machines, right? They have very long tails.
Yeah.
It's going to be around a long time, right? It's not going to go away anytime soon. Not because it takes time. It's just something just makes sense to run as VM sometimes. These are big fat applications, right? I mean, you're running an SAP application in a factory. I mean, could it be a containerized application? Sure, but it's working. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Let it go, right? So we want to support that, and that's a big chunk of our team's bandwidth presently. We want to make it easier and easier for customers to explore and find new applications. So and in fact, the following is the piece of feedback you gave us 2 weeks ago, which is this notion of a catalog in the product.
Okay.
So just make it more easy for people to find new piece of code. And in fact, from an enterprise perspective, the nice thing about catalogs is that enterprise architecture teams are probably going to say, okay, so the blessed version of Redis is this, whatever, 1.2.3, I don't know, whatever version. And the blessed version of Nginx is X. And hey, anybody in the team, if you want to use Redis and Nginx, the platform that we paid for, hopefully Rafay, already has a version of Nginx in the catalog, use this, but not from callouts.
A known state, right? Yep. It's a known entity, so known quantity.
You see how this becomes going from just a catalog concept to an enterprise grade?
Yeah.
Right? Because now it becomes about compliance and governance, right? So we want to always marry that thing. So we're working on those things. There's a few other, security capabilities we're working on. Look, to be fair, we're not a security company. We don't want to be. But when it comes to interacting with the cluster, how we orchestrate, how we collect information, et cetera, we want it to be a secure platform. So we're doing a lot of investments there. But these things are what we're working on in the next 6 months. I mean, the most fascinating thing about this company and arguably the last company that I work on. So many times, like venture capitalists have asked me, right? So what's your roadmap for the next 5 years? And I tell them, yeah, dude, I have no idea. You ask me what's my roadmap for next year? I sort of know because this market is moving so fast. Like a year ago, had somebody told me that, okay, are you going to support VMs at some point in your platform? I would say, what are you kidding me? Why would you ever do VMs? But no, the market clearly needs it, right? So we have to be nimble enough and open, right, to listening. And at least in my case, like I was completely wrong about VMs. I used to think this is crazy. Why would we ever do this? Why does KubeVirt even exist? But no, it makes complete sense.
That's
Red Hat, OpenShift, absolutely right about that.
Yeah. Great stuff. No, that's great. I think what you've built here is fantastic. Like I said, I kind of fell in love with the platform the first time I used it. So looking forward to seeing what's coming out. I am interested in the KubeVirt thing because I have been dabbling in that myself, and I think that's certainly just that mixture of the multi sort of hybrid cloud situation. I think it's really great. So in terms of some information about Rafay, what I'll do is on the show notes I'll post some links to your website, to your value prop. there'll be some information about the UI and everything like that. But I think, let's wrap it up. It's been great to have you on the show. Some really great insights into not just Kubernetes, but also, just modern applications, what it takes to deploy and manage and operate, and why all these things that you've talked about are so important moving forward, not only from a DevOps perspective, but from an enterprise perspective, that it's only going to reach that tipping point once we solve holistically what you guys are looking to put into the platform. So I think there's a great future there. So with that, just want to finish off by saying that if you aren't subscribed to the show again, please hit the subscribe. Again, click on the podcast links. You can find me at Anthony Spiteri and at GTWGT Podcast, and obviously at gtwgt.com. With that, I'd like to thank Haseeb, thank Rafay, and we will see you next time on Great Things with Great Tech.
Anthony, great to talk to you. Look forward to speaking again soon.